Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome back once again to the GSMC Baseball Podcast here on the GSMC Podcast Network. And if there ever was a better time to be talking about MLB baseball, we just had a crazy week, an absolutely crazy week. If you're not up to date on it, we had a move in the sense of many of them where 59 players did not get tendered to contracts because of the deadline on Wednesday. And from there, well, we saw 56 of them move into free agency. Massive, massive, massive implications to come from this. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to dive into this. We're going to talk about our rumor mill, of course, getting you updated on everything that's happening with teams moving forward. We got some potential free agent news. We got some trade target news. We're going to get you in on all of that for sure. We also are going to take the time to talk about, well, who are our top new free agents? Who are some of these guys that are joining this class that are going to be of interest, are going to catch some teams' eyes, going to find some work probably relatively quicker than some of our other guys that are new free agents. And then I also want to talk about, well, what in the world did this Wednesday contract situation mean? What did all of these moves mean? What are they showing us about this complete offseason? It's an interesting topic, an interesting discussion. We have 30 MLB teams that are in a tough spot. And with that being said, we have to be understanding that it's going to be a free agent market like one we maybe haven't seen in a while and how it could all break down. So we'll see where this ends up going, but it's going to be something fun to talk about. But of course, we are going to be starting things off with some news and noise around the league, getting you caught up on all 30 MLB teams. And a lot of this is going to be also with these arbitration-eligible players. So, starting things off, the Tampa Bay Rays, the American League champions, have offered 2021 contracts to 7 of their arbitration-eligible players. Big one including starting pitcher Tyler Glasnow. The others, left-handers Ryan Yarbrough, pitched some big innings for them in the postseason. Jose Alvarado, right-hander Yoni Chirinos, first baseman Ji-Man Choi, infielder Joey Wendell, and outfielder Manuel Margot. A lot of moves for them. Big decisions. Glasnow obviously being the biggest of them. Went 5-1 in 11 regular season starts in 2020. 6'8" right-hander. 2-3 during the postseason. 2 losses in the World Series. But he was a big player in that World Series. They aren't getting there without him. He is a big part of their future. And a big reason why we even hear potentially Tampa Bay even thinking about moving on with Blake Snell. He's a big reason why. So them extending an offer deal is a big move. Some other contracts that have been offered out there. Well, Carlos Correa. The Houston Astros have decided to offer contracts to arbitration-eligible shortstop Correa, along with infielder Eldemes Diaz and right-hander Lance McCullers Jr. on Wednesday. You know, the Astros being a team that made the playoffs, even though in a short season where things were very interesting for a team. Correa's only 26 years old, hit .264 during the regular season, batted .362 with 6 home runs, 17 RBIs in the 13 playoff games, really picked things up. The former number 1 overall pick seems to be someone that is in the fold for Houston moving forward, even with a little bit of trade chatter that has been out there. You can't just let this guy walk like we've seen some other guys potentially walking already. Some other guys, players for the Astros, Diaz, he's 30 years old. Also was great in the postseason, hitting .353 after batting .241 in the regular season. So showing some promise towards the end of the year. And McCullers, who's 27 years old, went 3-3 with a 3.93 ERA after missing 2019 season because of Tommy John surgery. There's a move here where it looks like the Astros are just trying to keep their own. Guys that were productive, stay with what they have. Good, solid moves for sure going around. Another arbitration move, well, the New York Yankees offered a contract to catcher Gary Sanchez on Wednesday, making sure that he could also stick around. This was going to be an interesting move because the Yankees and Gary Sanchez, while he has a good past, he is a little bit in question as the catcher right now moving forward. The Yankees also agreed to a one-year deal with right-hander Luis Cessa and a one-year deal with right-hander Ben Heller. Allowed right-hander Jonathan Holder to become a free agent, declining him an offer. Now, Gary Sanchez was ultimately replaced as the catcher in the playoffs this last year. He hit 147 in the regular season with 10 home runs, 24 RBIs. That 147 average would have been the lowest in the majors if he had enough at-bats to qualify, but he didn't. And in the postseason, wasn't much better. 1 of 8 in 3 games. That one hit was a home run, great. I mean, we don't question his power. His power's always been there. 2019, Sanchez had 34 home runs in 104 games while hitting .232, so a major drop down. He is a two-time All-Star, and in his 6 seasons with the Yankees, he's got a .236 batting average, 115 home runs. There's very much a question whether he is going to be the starter or if he's going to have a very short leash moving forward with the Yankees. There's been rumors of them talking to Yadier Molina. You don't sign Yadier Molina to be your backup. He's coming in to be your starter. So I'm wondering, yes, you got Sanchez here, if he's going to be a guy that they try to move after this agreement. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's going to be a name that has a little bit of interest moving forward. So something to definitely be looking at. Another guy that was interesting on the Wednesday deadline that did not get a contract offer, well, Kyle Schwarber, becoming a free agent after 6 seasons with the Chicago Cubs. They did tender a contract to Chris Bryant, Javi Baez, and Wilson Contreras. But this is looking like it's the first real move that the Cubs are making, moving on from their World Series core. And reading about this, it was very interesting. Jed Hoyer, who is the new Cubs president of baseball operations, said that Schwarber wasn't surprised that this happened, was disappointed. I mean, I'm sitting here surprised that it happened. So there must have been some more conversations obviously going on there in the whole situation. Now, Schwarber's 27, and this is last year of arbitration, so club control is gone after this. But they decided to let him go instead of paying him $8 to $9 million next season. And they didn't rule out, Jed Hoyer didn't rule out bringing him back on a shorter deal. They're going to keep the door open, as he said, continue to talk to him about coming back. And it was tough. He said he's a Cubs legend, which he was a big part in that World Series run. And it seems like a very interesting departure. Schwarber ended up posting on his Twitter kind of a goodbye. So the idea of him returning seems a little questionable. A lot of players don't just throw that out there. It seems like he might be moving on. And across his career, Schwarber hit .230 and 121 home runs in 551 regular season games. Playoff performances are kind of his thing. He hit .412 in 5 games for the Cubs as a designated hitter in the 2016 World Series, which they won that in 7 games. And he missed all but 2 games in the 2016 regular season. So him coming back and performing like he did in the postseason, again, it's going down as some big-time status, and he'll be remembered by Cubs fans all around. But there's just a lot of interesting things going to be going on here, and it's not going to be the only things happening. I mean, Albert Amora Jr. also was another guy that the Cubs have decided to let go. And on top of Baez, Contreras, and Bryant getting contracts back, they also tendered contracts to Ian Happ and Victor Caratini. So there's a lot going on there for the Cubs. And so I'm wondering if extensions are going to happen. Somebody's going to get an extension out of that group, you have to think. I don't believe that everyone's going to walk. But Schwarber really being the first guy to go. So decisions are starting to be made for the Chicago Cubs. Some actual acquisition moves outside of some tendering contracts. Well, former All-Star reliever Corey Knebel has been traded by the Milwaukee Brewers to the Los Angeles Dodgers. Now, it seemed like he was potentially going to be let go by the Brewers, but instead the trade happening to the Dodgers just moments before the non-tender deadline came and went on Wednesday. World Series champs sending a player to be named later or cash considerations to the Brewers in exchange for Knebel, who had a little bit of a tough season. He's coming off of Tommy John surgery, but there's upside there. So Knebel had a 1.78 ERA with 126 strikeouts and 76 innings in 2017. But then tore his ulnar collateral ligament in 2019. Spent the next 16 months working on his way back. 2020 came back, 6.08 ERA, 15 strikeouts, 8 walks. And his fastball kind of dipped in speed. So that was a concern. Being someone up in the Wisconsin area watching Knebel, he had power. He had more bite on his curveball before the surgery. But again, he just came back. So this is the Dodgers making a potential upside play, saying, hey, we're going to give him some more time to recover and come back to his normal self. But it is what it is. It's a risk play. They're not really giving up much. Player to be named later, cash considerations. And if the Brewers truly were looking to be moving on from him, then why not get a little something in return? Knebel's going to be a free agent after next season, projected to make about $5 million in his arbitration, which it seems like it's just going to be a lot of nothing to the Dodgers. And they're just saying, hey, do we have something here potentially that's going to boost our bullpen? And lastly, the Twins, Minnesota Twins, and closer Taylor Rogers have agreed to a $6 million contract, 1 year, and this is coming from multiple sources. Rogers had a 4.05 ERA in 21 appearances with 9 saves and 2 blown chances during the 60-game season. Left-hander was the last Minnesota player eligible for arbitration, meaning the Twins have no salaries to exchange with agents this winter and won't have to be worrying about hearing any of those hearings moving forward. They declined the contract of left fielder Eddie Rosario and reliever Matt Weisler, making them both free agents, and they reached 1-year deals with Jose Barrios, Byron Buxton, Tyler Duffy, Mitch Garver, and Caleb Thielbar. So the Twins making a lot of moves, maybe going into the winter meetings with the ability to, potentially make other improvements to their roster. So a lot that could be possibly happening there. So that's going to be it for our news and noise around the league, getting you caught up on all 30 MLB teams. We are going to take a quick break, and we come back. We are going to dive into the rumor mill. Where could players be signing their new contracts? Players be traded? What teams are interested? Who's picking up some steam? We're going to talk about all of that coming back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Rumor mill keeps pushing along, and man, do we have some new updates, especially when you have all these new free agents that have been added to the fold. It's just going to make things a little more complicated. And we're gonna talk about it coming up here, but it's going to be just a very interesting free agent. And we're going to talk about some of the top new free agents that have joined the fold as well. But starting off with just some of the rumors that we're hearing at the moment. Well, the Boston Red Sox, it wouldn't be an offseason if they don't get involved, are starting to show some interest in former Twins outfielder Eddie Rosario. And he's among one of those best players that didn't get tendered a contract before the Wednesday deadline. And you can see it. He's going to be getting a lot of looks right away. He was an interesting move. Now, we understand why the Twins did it, in the sense of they're trying to open it up for one of their top prospects to come through. But that doesn't mean he's not a good player, and he's going to be getting a lot of attention right away. Now, there's some interesting connections here with the Red Sox, as Rosario, being a Puerto Rican player, has a connection to manager Alex Cora from their time when they played with Team Puerto Rico in the World Baseball Classic. So that connection is believed to have a little bit of interest. And this is coming from John Morosi. Now, Boston seems like they definitely have a lot of other things that they need to fill when it comes to looking at their pitching staff for sure. But it's a good, interesting move in the sense that they don't necessarily know what their outfield 100% is going to look like next year. Now, Jackie Bradley Jr., who had probably one of his best years out in center, we know he's a defensive stud. Offense hasn't always been his strong key, but it was a pretty good offensive year for him. He is a free agent. Benintendi, who has been in left field for a long time, is potentially a guy that could be moving to center field. That's something we've been talked about. There's also been other rumors of other outfielders that potentially the Red Sox are in, so we don't know if they believe fully in Benintendi going forward as well. And the left field position is where Rosario had played a little bit in Minnesota. And so Cora could move Benintendi to center, Rosario to left, and Alex Verdugo to right. So it works out. There's a lot going on in Fenway Park in the outfield. I think we all know that, with the Green Monster and then right field just being a massive and just weirdly shaped spot. So no matter what, it's going to be a learning curve wherever he ends up going to play. But Rosario seems like an interesting move that potentially could be going towards the Red Sox. We'll see in the coming days for sure. Well, we talked last time about James McCann being an underrated free agent target. Well, it looks like the Mets could be pushing for McCann. Now, they just signed reliever Trevor May. Could their next free agent player be McCann? Talks seem to be very active between both sides, and the Mets are looking to make a push to sign him. And this is coming from reports from FanSided's Robert Murray and MLB Network insider John Heyman. We've kind of been on this one from the start, in the sense that the Mets are going to make a move for a catcher. That is a spot of need. That's why a lot of people have penned them as a favorite for Real Muto as well, considering that we think they're going to be an aggressive team in free agency. But it looks like they might be going one tier down, a little bit more discounted price. James McCann, who made some improvements defensively, and offensively, his numbers are up there with a lot of great catchers. So it's looking like this would be a smart move, especially if they're trying to gather a couple different players instead of just one big free agent splash, trying to make it for a few different players. So James McCann to the Mets, there's potential there, but I think there's going to be a lot of teams that are still going to be in on the McCann sweepstakes. So I'm not just pushing him to one team just yet. Staying in that great city of New York, well, the Yankees remain the front runner to sign DJ LeMahieu. We think that one's going to happen. It seems too right. They can't really let him go, it feels like. But ESPN's Buster Olney may have some news on a potential backup. New York has been in contact with fellow free agent Michael Brantley, who could help out in filling a hole in their 2021 lineup. Now, an interesting decision here, in the sense of just trying to get a powerful, great bat. They have very few left-handed hitters. And that was kind of the big ploy on this. So Michael Brantley would be a guy that could help fill that role among the free agents. And he's just one of the free agents that New York has seemed to have gotten in touch with. They might have contact with a few different players at the moment. And right now, it's being projected that LeMahieu is going to get in the range of a 4-year, $70 million contract, about $17 million a year. Brantley, who is 34 years old, could be getting something a little bit shorter term, also something near the $15 million range. So signing both of them is going to be hard in this offseason, even if it's the Yankees, I know. But it's going to be hard to shell out money for both of those guys, especially for a Yankees team where they may not think that they're that far off. They don't necessarily need both of these guys because when it comes down to it, they're going to need a little pitching help as well. So we can't sit here and pretend like just getting more offense is going to be the fix for them. No, they need to be looking into what's going to happen with their pitching behind Garrett Cole. Yeah, their bullpen is pretty solid, but starting wise, we have some issues there. So we need to be talking about that. So if LeMahieu ends up having a change of heart and ends up going somewhere else, Brantley could be the guy. Brantley could be the guy that we end up seeing. When it comes to some trade news, well, Gene Segura is being a name that is floating around, and it's an interesting one because we are also the offseason still ahead of the major shortstop free agent market. So next year, all those big-time names. Could we be seeing some teams trying to buy lower to fill their shortstop position and fill that gap? Now, also, we have to notice and point out that Segura isn't just a shortstop. He can play across the infield in a few different spots. He's very versatile with what he can do. But it seems like his name is starting to pick up some more steam across the league in some trade talks. And one of the teams that seems to be very interested is the Toronto Blue Jays. And again, the versatility of him as an infielder would make sense here because Segura did play second and third base in 2020, moving away from shortstop because the team had signed Didi Gregorius in Philadelphia. And so you can put him in a lot of different spots. You can mix and match him with Bichette and Biggio. He can help you out all around. And they also have that gap there at third base because Travis Shaw is not in the fold right now for the Blue Jays. So Segura hitting 276 over 2 years with Philadelphia, 19 homers, 198 games. He's a solid player. Is he a wow? Like, this is going to be the greatest thing? No, he's maybe not the most exciting move for you, but he is a solid player in the sense that he can help fill a gap that you have and give you some sort of production. Now, he's been on the move a lot, traded 4 times since 2012, going from the Angels to the Brewers, to the D-backs, then to the Mariners, now to the Phillies. And I don't take it as something as you can't believe in him. He's been a good trade piece for a lot of teams trying to fill gaps. That's what it has been. And in the 2021 season, he's set to earn a little under $15 million and close to that in 2022. And then he has a $17 million team option with a $1 million buyout in 2023. So his contract is not awful. It's not a major problem. And you have an out in a couple of years. And it's seeming like this is a move for the Phillies to get rid of that $15 million. While the Blue Jays can take it on, they're not paying a lot of big contracts right now. The Phillies might be doing this to open up some money for Real Muto. So they may have to eat some of the salary in Segura, but it seems like a move where they're trying to open up for something that they're trying to do. The Phillies are projected a payroll of $146 million for 2021, and that's $39 million lower than it was at the end. That should help you to get Real Muto and potentially something else as well. So we were talking about pitchers a little bit before, and the pitcher market, well, it's not completely done yet. We need to start talking about some of these buy low pitchers because that's kind of what most of them are now that Trevor Bauer is the one guy. These players that have potential, but obviously there is some risk involved. And one of the big ones is going to be a guy in Corey Kluber, who injury history, that's your big knock. Staying healthy. There is some execs that think they know where he's going to end up. And they think it's a good chance it's going to be between the Yankees, Mets, or Red Sox. And with the pitching market being the way it is, these are three teams that are looking to add. We talked about the Yankees before. They need help behind Garrett Cole. Red Sox, you just flat out need help. And the Mets, they want to put some depth on what could potentially be a big-time strength. Now, their pitching isn't all. Like, you got, obviously, Jacob deGrom. Great. You just got Marcus Stroman to return. Awesome. You're hoping that Noah Syndergaard comes back healthy. Hoping. But then after that, that's your three. If you can get a fourth, like a guy like Bauer, buy low, and then he hits for you, your starting rotation ends up to be very, very strong. And I see this making sense for most of them. There's been numerous reports for these teams showing interest. Boston was reported on Tuesday and having interest in the 34-year-old. He's got an off-season home that supposedly sits just near Fenway Park, so that's a big thing. And, after a very tough 2020 season where the Red Sox offense put up a lot of runs, but their pitching couldn't stop anybody, a very low-risk, short-term deal for Kluber just makes a lot of sense. Okay? And while he only pitched one inning last year for the Rangers, he is expected to be recovering and throwing bullpen sessions this month. So there's a good chance that he could be ready for the start of the next season. And we haven't seen necessarily anything connected with the Yankees yet, but again, they need help. Tanaka, Paxton, J.A. Happ, they're all free agents. So we need to see something happening there. So executives, that's where they believe Kluber is going to be maybe a fight between those three teams. And last bit on the rumor mill, well, Marcell Ozuna. He's drawing some interest from a few teams, and this is coming from the Giants and the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays, again, being interested in a lot of players. Now, the Blue Jays are a good one because he could be potentially playing a little bit in the outfield, but also he can be used in that DH spot. We know there's going to be a DH for the Blue Jays. The Giants, we don't necessarily know that. So if they are going to be pushing for this signing, they are 100% taking that risk that he's going to have to play in the outfield. And defensively, you don't want to be playing Marcell Ozuna. Sorry, somebody had to say it. Signed a one-year contract with the Braves last season. 18 homers, 56 RBIs, hitting .338. He was kind of good at the plate. Kind of good. The Giants are a team that believe we're not that far off. We could do this. We're in contention here a little bit. Did you not see us pushing in the National League West? And we may not have all the star power that some other teams have. Did you not see us there? So I see the connection. I don't think a lot of guys are still going to get major contracts this year, at least long contracts. So taking a low-risk buy in Ozuna, why not? Why not? I like the Giants trying to be aggressive, and they continue to just be a smart front office. They make smart moves. Ever since they had all of these pitchers that were on bad contracts, they had to get creative. And they had to try to build the best possible teams they could. And they've done a lot of great things because of it. So I like the opportunity of the Giants, but I also like the Blue Jays. I think it makes sense. Hopefully his defense isn't so bad that you have an issue with Vlad Guerrero Jr. and him both trying to occupy a defensive DH spot. But I add to your team, Blue Jays. You're not paying anybody. Add to your team. Try to be competitive. Go all in when you got some young guys. I like it. So that's going to be it for our rumor mill. What we have all around the league. The noise just keeps coming. It keeps coming. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about what are some of these top new free agents that were just added to the market, because holy man, there is a lot of them here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
It's hard to get over all of these new names that have been added to the free agent market. I was so surprised. Now, we knew that with the non-tendering and with everything that happened in the previous season, there were going to be some names. There were going to be some names that were going to be different. We understood that. But a total of 59 players non-tendered, and 3 of them were immediately re-signed. So Kyle Ryan, Dan Winkler with the Cubs, Kyle Farmer of the Reds. But 56 new players were added to the free agent class. And that is just a massive, massive, massive amount. So I wanted to make sure that we took the time to talk about, okay, some are these names that have been added. What are our best players that are joining the fold here? And I'm looking solely at wins above replacement from 2019 and 2020 to see what we have in comparing all these players, to see these players, as what they truly are. I mean, are they making a difference on their team? So starting off with the one that surprised me absolutely the most is Kyle Schwarber, who had a 3.0 WAR. And Schwarber's been a big part of the Cubs for a little while here now, winning the World Series in 2016. He had that torn ACL and LCL in his left knee. He returned to hit .412 in that off season in 2016. Production versus lefties obviously is not something a strength of his. But he seemed to not have an awful season as a slugger last year. I was just shocked. We've been hearing all of this news about how he is going to be part of that core decision of what we're going to do with this team. What are we going to do moving forward? And while his batting average wasn't the greatest last season, that's known, he is there to swing for power. We had the fluky year last year for a lot of players. So I'm not going to defend him having a bad season, but we have to take that into account because in 2019 he batted .250 with 38 home runs and 92 RBIs. Easily his best season. When you're 1 year removed from that in a fluky 2020 season, I was just shocked that they're just going to let him walk. We're going to see a team, most likely in the American League, I think, swoop in for this one. He's going to be a guy playing DH, maybe very spot defensive positions. I don't know if many National League teams are going to be overly interested, unless if you just really need offensive help. But he seems like a guy destined for a DH spot, especially going up against righties. It'll be his thing. But I'm still kind of shocked just talking about it. I didn't see this coming. I didn't think it would happen. Schwarber just seemed like he was going to be one of the guys that maybe was traded. Just letting him walk was a very surprising move. But it's starting to truly show, the Cubs have been serious about all the things we've been talking about. Some decisions need to be made on this core of players. And this is the first big domino, it really feels like. Moving on. One of our other great free agents, Hanser Alberto, 2.5 WAR, splitting between second base and third base. He was once put on waivers 4 separate times in one offseason. But Alberto ended up becoming a guy loved in Baltimore. Hit .299 in his last 2 years with the Orioles, .394 against left-handed pitchers. he's a steady player, but he's just not a guy a part of the long-term plan, it feels like, for Baltimore, which is sad because he's not an awful player. He played in 54 games last year, batted 283 last year, 305 and 139 games in 2019. Those are some solid numbers, somebody that you could plug in, especially if he's going to be a second baseman, which would be my guess somewhere. If you're getting a guy come play second base, bat around 300, I think you're going to take that and not complain much about it. Seems like he's going to be a steady signing. I think a team is going to be very happy to fill their depth with Hanser, at least moving forward. We talked about him a little bit before, Eddie Rosario. This one makes a little more sense when you just look at the full construction of the Twins team. Now, he was a big part of the Twins offense. I mean, he got some MVP award votes in his time in Minnesota. Plate discipline's a problem. Low on base rate, obviously, brings down his value. And that on base rate, I mean, take it or leave it in a shortened season. We'll see. But there is still potentially some interest that at a lower salary, Minnesota would love to have him back. Has a pop out of his bat, strong arm in the outfield. That's going to grab the attention of a lot of teams. And we talked about before how the Red Sox are a team that potentially could be interested. There's going to be a lot of noise around Rosario moving forward. And ultimately, this move is one where they can open up a spot in their outfield for Alex Kirilloff to jump in. They have a top prospect that they want to get into the games, and this was a way to move it. It's just, I sit here interested in a lot of this. Like, you can't just move guys without getting some return sometimes. I think about this in sports all over the place. He still batted .257 last year, 13 home runs, 42 RBIs. Like, there's value there. If you want to trade him, you can get something. You can get something. I just, some of these moves, they're surprising me because of these decisions. Brian Goodwin for Cincinnati. He was acquired from the Angels at the trade deadline this last year. Struggled in his time with the Reds. But that's a shortened amount of time as well. He can play all three outfield spots. Just 1 year removed from his best season in the big leagues with the Angels. 17 homers, 108 OPS plus. We are giving up on some of these players too soon. Now, I understand. 215 batting average, 6 home runs. You're not that excited about that. But like you said, best season last year, 262 batting average, 17 home runs, 47 RBIs. Gonna play in the outfield for you. Pat's lefty. There's value there. Moving on from him, he's gonna get some attention as well. Very quickly, I imagine. I don't think many teams are gonna move on from him all that easily. Archie Bradley, former number 7 overall pick in the 2011 draft. He's a solid reliever. When he moved to the bullpen in 2017, we saw some very good things from him. This is another name moved on from the Cincinnati Reds, who acquired him last season as well. It's surprising that they make this move for a reliever like this and just decide to move on. 2.95 ERA in 16 games. Last year, ultimately 18 innings. Maybe you want to see things go down a little bit, but we know that he can be a promising guy out of the bullpen. We know that's possible. 2017, he had a 1.73 ERA. His best season. For sure his best season in 63 appearances. He's kept it relatively down below 4 ever since then and below 3 last year. With 27 saves on his resume as well, he only made 6 appearances with the Reds, so it just feels like a team that traded for him, you gave up on him really quickly. Very, very, very quickly. And the Reds are going to be in a tough spot when it comes to free agency already with some of the names that they're trying to get back. They're trying to get Bauer. They're trying to show interest in the shortstop market. I find it interesting that this could be a money save for them. Maybe potentially they're thinking, but I don't know. I think if you're going to make a move for a guy at the trade deadline, just because you think he's going to better your team, you're just going to give up on him that quick. Hard to say. Hansel Robles with a 1.7 WAR. He had a little bit of a boost with the Angels. Struggled in 2020. He was claimed off waivers in 2018. Put up a 2.97 ERA in 37 games in 2018. 2.48 in 71 appearances in 2019. Jumped up to a 10 ERA last year. So I think there's a lot of concerns with what he's going to be after really boosting himself. But he has a resume as well that looks like things could be a little more promising. Once he was claimed from the Mets in 2018, he had some strong stretches. Now, I've been on record saying that I think pitchers having bad seasons is a little more scary than hitters not finding a rhythm. So I understand this one a little bit more. But if he returns to any type of form in the back end of a bullpen, he could be a good move for a lot of teams. Danny Santana, the Rangers letting him go. He was Player of the Year in 2019 for the Rangers. Hit 283 with 28 home runs, 81 RBIs. Elbow surgery was the thing that put him in question for 2021. So there's some intrigue there in the sense that maybe the Rangers know something. He only played 15 games last year. He struggled in those 15 games, but it's a very small sample. If he had such a great season in 2019, struggled in 2020, had surgery, and we don't really know, I get a feel there's something going on there. Because the Rangers don't necessarily have any major hype they have to live up to. I don't think a lot of teams are betting that they're going to be great in the American League West next year. I find that one just very interesting, and I think a lot of teams are going to move with caution on that one. Adam Duvall, 16 homers, 37 RBIs in 57 games for the Braves in 2020. Above average OPS in his 2 seasons at Atlanta. 16th among hitters in barrel rate during that time. This one was a little bit surprising as well. 237 batting average isn't the greatest. You want to see that up, obviously. But the home runs and RBIs, he was also productive in a great Braves offense. Last year was even better, batting average-wise. Played in less games, so maybe you're going to see those numbers come down. This could be just the depth move that maybe the Braves don't see him in the long term. He's going to get an opportunity somewhere. Now, I'm just shocked. Really am. With a lot of these. I think there's a lot of guys here that could have some potential. Some of them make sense. Some of these names we'll see. Maikel Franco is one that just really kind of caught my attention from the Royals. He led the Royals with 16 doubles, 38 RBIs. He could have doubled his salary in arbitration. And that is a big reason why the Royals maybe weren't interested. There was talk that they could bring him back at a lower price, but they also have a prospect in waiting in Kelvin Gutierrez, who's potentially the main reason why. So similar to Rosario with the Twins, they have someone they think could be coming in that situation. I mean, Franco batted 278 last year, 8 home runs, 38 RBIs. And he's going to be a nice depth move in third base. And I think this might be a little fortunate for him in the sense that he doesn't go into a very strong third base market right now. He is going to be one of the top guys in free agency at that position. Now, there's going to be some other players that are versatile, can play in different spots, but him being one of the better third basemen right now might work out for him, which I find to be kind of funny in all of this. So something to definitely keep your eye on. There's the list of names. Like we said, 56 people, 56 players. And there's some other guys that are going to be some risk guys you can take, like Travis Shaw is out there. See if you can get him to come back to his ways. Albert Almora is going to be an interesting one. Another guy coming away from the Cubs. Good defender in center field. Struggled in 2019 at the plate. Only 34 at-bats in 2020, but he might get some opportunity just because of his defense. There's some names out there. We added to this free agent market, and I wonder if that's going to hurt some of our other free agents for sure with all of this going on. But I do want to also dive into, well, what in the world does this mean when all of these guys are all of a sudden becoming new free agents. It's an interesting thing, and we're going to take some time to talk about it. What do these contract moves mean moving forward for the rest of the MLB? Coming up here in the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
So, it's time to have the hard conversations. All right, all my new free agents, you guys are going to have to huddle around because we're going to need to talk about what this free agency is going to be like, what has happened. It's time to get down to the nitty-gritty, talk about the conversation, and just be real. What happened last season? Well, we took a 162-game season, crunched it down to 60 games. All right. From there, we had no fans in the stands, and we played our games to the best we could. Because of all of this, our result, teams lost a lot of money last year. Attendance, TV money, less games. All of these are big hits. All of these are massive big hits, and it gets to be even more interesting in a league that has revenue sharing. Well, there isn't any really revenue to share when nobody was allowed to have fans. Okay, we have these TV deals which are untouchable, but even with these TV deals, we lost a lot of games. So there are some issues. And then we take into account, well, all the players were fighting for as much salary as they possibly could. Did they get their full salaries? No. But when you don't have the money coming in like you wanted, getting to pay most of these salaries gets to be a very difficult issue. And now, obviously, there's a big conversation to be had here with what we should have done with last season, everything that was going on. It's tough. It's tough. Hindsight's 2020. They wanted to get games in. Both sides wanted to get games in. There's a lot going on there. But when you have a team like the Dodgers saying that they lost money last year, the Dodgers, one of the biggest franchises, TV deals, they are the cream of the crop up there with the Yankees, Red Sox, and other teams. They are saying they lost money. They are having layoffs in their stadium. That should give you a pretty good indicator of what the rest of the league had to deal with as well. There is a lack of revenue to share among teams, and that's going to make a lot of things this offseason harder. This is why we have so many new free agents. There's a lot of guys that were going to be going into arbitration, and they might have gotten a boost in their money, but maybe their production doesn't feel like it matched necessarily what they're going to have to pay. Teams are going to have to pay next season. So that's why we're having some guys move on. Now, there's definitely some interesting moves in there still, because some of these guys that you could have taken and tendered a contract to, you could have looked to potentially move them and get something back. Something. With any type of club control that's possibly there. But a lot of teams decided not to even deal with it because they don't know what their return is going to be. They don't know necessarily what these salaries are going to be, so they figured it was better off to just let some players go and become free agents. We aren't going to see many situations like this moving forward, I'm imagining. Now, obviously, fingers crossed that things get better with COVID-19 moving forward. We come up with a vaccine. We come up with something. But if we do that and we get back to any type of normalcy, we're not going to see free agent periods like this very much. This was massive, massive moves. And so it's going to now affect the rest of the free agent market going forward. Contracts have been slow already. We haven't had a lot of news. It's trickling in. And when we're going to have our winter meetings coming, which are going to also be virtual, which is also going to be taking away a lot of what happens at winter meetings where agents and teams and they all can just talk to each other. It's going to be harder. You got to set up these meetings now. This free agency is going to be slower. Contracts will be in a slower work progress. It's going to be so much harder to get these deals done, and this thing is going to drag out compared to normal seasons. Now, baseball could be a slow process already. That's nothing different, but it could be much different compared to what we're used to seeing. And the other reasons why contracts are going to be a slower work in progress, well, it's harder to commit big money. I'm sorry, Stars. I'm sorry, Real Muto, Bauer, Springer, LeMahieu, Azuña. I'm sorry, guys. You may be popular. You may be great. But we just lost a lot of money last year. And it's going to be harder for us to agree up front to such massive contracts. Now, are they going to be there still? Yeah, some teams are going to give them. Some teams are going to bank on it. Owners will feel secure in the sense that they can do this. They will still happen. But it gets to be more difficult. Think about all the teams we've been talking about as this has been dragging on. We're getting some teams like the Blue Jays in the sense where you might not think they're big spenders, but a lot of their players are on cheap contracts. We're talking about the Mets a lot because their new owner is going to be willing to spend. We're talking about the Yankees a lot. Hey, they've been spenders in the past. We are getting a lot of the same teams that are going to be comfortable spending just because we know what they're capable of. It's harder for the rest of the league. And it makes me wonder if more of these discount players are going to be popular. We talked about James McCann. Real Muto is a great player. He's a great player. But you can get a lot from McCann at a much cheaper price. And guess what? We just added 56 free agents to the pool, which is going to make that even more interesting. There might be more discount prices there. So, yeah, okay, you want to come in and you want to get a massive, massive contract? Well, we have this guy that might potentially be a little bit cheaper. It's going to be a lot of give and take. I'm wondering if we're going to see more prove-it deals because of it, especially a lot of our new free agents. It could be short one-year contracts. And it's funny because of Trevor Bauer. We heard about Trevor Bauer wanting to do the one-year contracts to maximize his value. If he wants to get his top payday, okay, one-year contract might be able to do it. But it might be tricky now as well because do you want to take this risk and maybe the payday is not as great? Or maybe you might get some more money down the line with your long-term deal. I wonder how much his perspective has changed on free agency, along with a lot of other players. Security might be hard to grab for a lot of these free agents. We've seen issues with 10-year deals with young players before, but even our guys that are our top free agents now, 4- and 5-year deals might be difficult. They might really be difficult. And we know some teams when they look at players, when they get on the other side of 30 already, they get a little nervous. All right, well, let's put on top of the fact of everything that we've seen with money. 1-year max contract for Bauer is one thing that I think that teams are setting themselves up for him that they could do it. Like the Angels might be all in after they made the trade for filling their shortstop position. I really wonder if they're setting themselves up to do it for the 1 year and go all in. But this offseason is going to just be difficult. And I'm really hoping that a lot of these players are buckled in and ready to understand that it's going to be hard to get the contract you want. It's going to be slow. I think you should listen to what all teams are offering you. You might have to get in on a 1-year prove-it deal and hope that things get better and you can cash in next year. This is going to be a slow offseason. We might have a few days over the winter meetings where things pick up a little bit, but there's a good chance that it's just going to fall right back down. It's going to take time for a lot of these names to sign. It's going to take time. And I really wonder if the construction of some contracts are going to try and bank on money to bounce back? Because that's going to be the ultimate question for teams, players across the league. When we start to get some attendance back in, when we start to get more games for our TV deals, when all of this starts to go back to any type of hopeful normalcy, will the money bounce back for us? And that's ultimately going to fall on any type of positive news focused around COVID. Are we going to have a vaccine? Are we going to learn something about the numbers? Is the science going to change? Whatever. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a medical professional. I'm not one to talk fully on that. I'm here to talk about what we're going to see with these baseball players in their contracts. This is just a tricky situation. And I feel for a lot of these players. And my ultimate guess right now, and honestly, it's just more of a gut feeling, I do think a lot of guys take shorter contracts, mainly because they might not have a choice from what teams are offering. And this potentially turns into an offseason next year with some great players we already know coming in to being loaded up again. So some of our better players from this year, maybe they take some shorter contracts to join the 2021 class. Maybe they take that opportunity to join. We already know about shortstops that are going to be great. We already know about that. But there's a lot of other potential players that could be out there. So it's difficult. It's going to be difficult. I truly feel for some of these guys that have set themselves up for great contracts. I really do. There's going to be just a lot of players out there. I mean, we already talked about shortstop again. Like Lindor is going to be out there. Story. We're going to have names. Seager joining that, along with some other pitchers, and there's going to be options. And I think these guys are going to be in tough spots. But we'll see. We'll see how the science turns, all the news around COVID, how that turns. It's going to only hopefully help their situation. So that's going to be it for me here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Had a lot of fun talking about this. Want to say thank you once again to all those downloading, listening. It means a great deal. It is so helpful. If you have the opportunity, would love for you to leave a positive comment review on the podcast. It would mean a great deal. And maybe you have something you want to talk about. Maybe you have some thoughts on the contracts that could be in the work. Maybe some of the top new free agents. Maybe you have someone that I didn't talk about that joined the free agent class you want to hear. Maybe rumor mills, other news and noise, whatever it may be. Anything is great. It helps the show, and I am so incredibly thankful for it. So I want to say thank you one last time. I'm going to be signing off. Collin Manley here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast and the GSMC Podcast Network.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.